On campus, it's a sad time for us because we had Reynolds Price here. You know, he came to Duke as a student in the early 50s. He joined the faculty here in 1958. So for all those years, there he was every day. And when I try to evoke for me the words that describe Reynolds, I thought of two, and one is the word soulful, and the other is the word sly. I say soulful because Reynolds was a person who just, the things he entered into them much more deeply than the rest of us usually do. We use language. Reynolds savored language. We read things and are done with them. Reynolds loved the things he read. He loved the things he wrote, loved the Bible. And of course, the thing I think I saw him love the most was just teaching, the work of awakening young minds by being demanding of them. You know, Ann Tyler was a student in the first class he ever taught at Duke. And from there, it was, I think, 52 years until I stuck my head into his class once upon a time. Lots of the brightest students here wanted to have a class with Reynolds Price. And they'd go in there, but it wasn't because he was popular and jokey. He was a figure of fear and trembling. But he was an inspiring, awakening teacher. But then I use the word sly because Reynolds was not a solemn, he was a serious person, but he was not a solemn person. In fact, he hated solemnity, he hated folly, he hated boredom, and you would never be anywhere with him without seeing some roll of his eye or some amusing aside he would make. Just a person who full of fun, full of life. And if I were to say a third thing, I never knew Reynolds in the days when he could walk. Reynolds had a tumor of the brain and the spine in the early 80s, and the radiation treatment for it eventually led him to lose the use of the lower half of his body. He wrote an amazing book, I reread it this weekend, called A Whole New Life, about, you know, what happens to you not only when you lose those powers, but when you face the fact that you'll never again be the person you took for granted every minute of your life. And I'll tell you, if anybody wants to start with a book by Reynolds Price, they could start with A Whole New Life. You get to the end and he says, what advice do I have for somebody who has lost some fundamental capacity that way? And he says, my advice to that person is, figure out who you can be next. That self is dead. Figure out who the new self is you could be and get busy becoming that self. It's scary, the burden, the profundity, the courage that's required by that. And all those were his everyday traits. I was coming up the stairs and I happened to know a bunch of students who were coming up the stairs with me, and so we were chatting and I said, well, where are you going? And they said, we're off to Reynolds Price's class. So I said, well, why don't I come down with you and say hello? So I walked in, he sat at the head of the table, and it was a room full of lively, smart people, but it wasn't a giggly or jokey atmosphere. They were in the presence of the awesome Reynolds Price. They loved him. They had the fun of that class. But as I say, I think he was a figure, an awe-inspiring figure. I think he relished being awe-inspiring. I think he was awe-inspiring. And I think he also relished the humor of being awe-inspiring. I'm a professor of literature long before I became a university administrator, and Reynolds Price is one of the great men of letters of the American South. He was discovered by Eudora Welty. He connects us all the way back to the great writers of the beginning of the last century and all the way forward to all the young writers he discovered and encouraged in modern times. Did Reynolds Price write his own epitaph? Knowing Reynolds, I would not be surprised if he did, but I have not yet seen it. And I would do Reynolds this favor. Reynolds is a person who used words with supreme care. So if I'm going to write Reynolds' epitaph, I'm going to take more than 30 seconds to do it.